and a very warm welcome to what is the 145th Security Thought Leadership webinar. And we're here every Thursday this time, where we examine a topic of interest to the security world. And the idea of thought leadership is not to try and solve the world issues, but in 45 minutes to get insights, to get ideas, to critique what's going on. And the purpose of that is that by examining what's going on today, we get a better type of security tomorrow. And the topic today is all about Ireland, security in Ireland. And what we're really interested to understand is there is a part of the world where security has been at the forefront and endemic in community life, where regulation has played a key part, and where the security world has had to cope with a number of challenges. What can we learn from Ireland? And I have got three guests from Ireland who are going to each in a second introduce themselves. And when they've done that, I'll invite each of them to make their opening statement. That's where they get 3 minutes to say whatever they want to say about this topic. And once that's done, I'll come to you, the audience, and invite you to ask questions. In fact, let me invite you to answer questions now. If you get your questions in early, I will endeavour to incorporate your question in the discussion that follows. So as you listen and you think about what people are saying, do get your questions in early. And some of you have sent questions in advance. Without further ado then, let's go and meet our panel. And first of all, I'm going to go to Jen and Jay. Jen, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, certainly. Hi, I'm Jennifer Ciolfi, and anyone who's met me knows that I don't have an Irish accent. I am an adopted Irish person for these days. I'm originally Canadian, and then came here by way of 3.5 years in Scotland. So hopefully going to give a bit of a global perspective.
Thank you very much indeed, and welcome and pleased to have you. Let's go and meet Paul. Paul, please introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Paul Scallon, and I'm the regulator for the private security industry. I'm a career civil servant, having worked in a number of government departments, and have been chief executive of the authority since 2014.
Paul, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for joining us. Good to have a regulator. The topic crops up quite a bit on these webinars, so it'll be good to get your insights. And finally, Garry. Garry, can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Garry Bergin. I am the commercial manager and security consultant for Manguard Plus, and I'm a chartered security professional and ACES board certified CPP.
Garry, thank you very much indeed. Well, that's our panel, and I know that around the world people are always impressed by the calibre of people we get. You write and tell me so. I'm delighted to have you three. I'm now going to come to each of you and ask you for your opening statement. 3 minutes when we invite you to tell us what your thoughts are on this topic. So Jennifer, to you first, please.
Certainly. I might have a couple of global references in speaking specifically about Ireland, in that I've only been here for just about 2 years, and those 2 years have been entirely during the pandemic. So a lot of what I've seen Ireland do, a lot of the security outputs that I've seen Ireland display have been in response to this insane situation that we all kind of find ourselves living with. That being said, I think I've noticed a couple of interesting themes that we can discuss later on about certain characteristics, perhaps more specifically to the Irish way of doing things, or things that I've noticed more prevalent in Ireland than in other places. The caliber of security is amazing in Ireland. And you've started to see now that Gary's a chartered security professional, I'm a chartered security professional, that level of professionalism, that level of certification, that level of achievement is starting to become more widespread. You're starting to see a bigger focus on academics. You're starting to see a bigger focus on education, as opposed to that old narrative where it was just do 10 years as a police officer and then kind of walk straight into a security manager role, which we all kind of, that was prevalent globally. I don't think that was anything specific to the Irish market. We see people here desperate for advancement, desperate for opportunities for growth. The industry in Ireland is absolutely phenomenal right now. The growth in Ireland, every tech company, I think, has a head office in Dublin. We have all the big tech giants setting up head offices here. So what you see here and scaling for probably for the last 2 years and probably for the next 5, I think is going to be phenomenal.
Jim, thank you very much indeed. Interesting context setting. Thank you. Paul, let's go to you. Paul, your opening statement, please.
Okay. Well, the regulated industry in Ireland is a very diverse one. We regulate 12 sectors at the moment, with a few more coming down the line in the next 18 months or so. So we range from security guarding, cash and transit, right through to the electronic security sectors of alarm, CCTV installation, access control, and then the likes of locksmiths and private investigators. So the impact of the pandemic, I suppose, was very varied depending on which sector you operated in. I think it's fair to say the guarding sector done very well out of the pandemic, by and large, whereas the electronic security sector and those that were locked down for a large time, probably suffered more. Obviously, cash and transit kind of went up and down depending on the lockdown and depending on commercial interests and how the economy was doing at the time. And even within sectors, there was a divide. If you look at the electronic security sector, there would have been a divide between those who relied on the domestic market against those who relied on the commercial market, and with the latter having some comfort during that period. Interestingly enough, we carried out some research over the summer with our licensed contractors just to see what the impact of COVID was. And I think, interestingly enough, what it does show is a great resilience on the part of the industry, some optimism on the part of the industry. Quite a lot of our contractors, I think around 30–40%, said they expected our turnover to be back at pre-COVID levels by the end of this year, which is amazing turnaround when you think, they were probably at zero or close to zero for a lot of them at the start of the year. And only about 1% have actually ceased trading, and that wasn't necessarily because of COVID. It may have been other reasons there. And very few were insolvent. I think we said, again, the research showed probably around 1% turned out to be insolvent because of COVID. And less than 6% had a fear of or felt that they were at risk of insolvency. So I think the industry itself has been very resilient during COVID. I think there's optimism out there in the industry for the future. And I think it's, as Jennifer said, your security industry, I think, is in a good place, and I think it is great future ahead of it.
Thank you very much indeed. Don't forget, audience, if you want to get your questions in, use the question answer button at the bottom of your screen, and we'll endeavour to incorporate that into the ensuing discussion. Garry, can we have your opening statement, please?
Yes, I believe that the enabler of good security in Ireland is that we have a strong, loyal workforce, who, from my perspective, they don't like changing employers. They generally have a good work ethic and have a kind of a can-do attitude and that kind of positive mindset. I believe there's been a huge increase in the standards and a kind of milieu of education, training and professionalism within Ireland. I think there's been, as Jen said, significant foreign investment, particularly in the data centre and pharma sectors. And we have attracted an experienced and knowledgeable workforce, which we've garnished from the best and brightest in the European Union, which have been allowed to come here through the travel and work placements. We have great oversight in Ireland from the PSA. We also have oversight from the public and CCTV systems, mobile phones, the revenue commissioners, patrolling systems, the ISO standards. I think that they're all very, very prevalent in Ireland at the moment. I think that the Irish security sector has fared well in the pandemic. Overall, I believe that with no real restrictions, companies who have diversified, been innovative, forward-thinking, have fared well. To be honest, I think every sector has had to make some fundamental change to their operations, such as working from home. I think there's been a massive increase in the demand for mobile patrols, and due to property inspections, Legionnaire disease prevention, checking for leaks and that kind of stuff. Huge increase in the volume and quality of data center work in Ireland, which is going to continue. So I think it's a great sector to get into at the moment. I think companies who have been emotionally intelligent to the needs of their clients will have been successful during the pandemic, because look, as we know, one size doesn't fit all in security. I think the main challenges facing Ireland security professionals now is the attraction and retention of good quality security officers within the industry, and as the main concern is due to the wage structure. I think security is a service which continually looks for that added value and innovation, particularly in reducing costs around the property management sector. There's limited number of advancement possibilities. However, some clients will pay additional rates of pay for specific security personnel with specific experience, and clients add these additional tasks onto staff to justify their increase. I think the barriers that we need to overcome to improve security in Ireland is the rate of pay for entry-level security officers. You know, I believe it should be at least the living wage, but it's important to kind of caveat that with, you know, the price paid by clients really justify the wages that can be paid by the employers. I think the security officers need to take some responsibility for their own continuous professional development if they want to get on. Making valuable QQI level training available to staff, I think, is critical. For example, Maynooth University ran a course 3-4 weeks ago. It was made available for €300 and it's worth €3,000, and it's QQI level 9. Increased staff recognition, such as, you know, the OSPAS and certification, and, you know, just endorsing the customer service element and trying to re-establish that security client interaction that's currently being hampered by mask wearing.
Garry, thank you very much indeed. Got a question here from Dennis Shep, who's Canadian, so but actually going to be a panelist next week, I might add. And Jennifer, I'll come to you first on this, if I might. Due to pandemic, impact on supply chains, costs of goods are predicted to rise, perhaps dramatically, which we've been hearing about as a global issue. We know security wages have been traditionally low. It's something Garry mentioned in his opening statement. Have you got any sense about how this is going to be dealt with? How big a deal is this going to be, Jennifer? And any thoughts on how it can be dealt with? Jennifer first.
Yeah, so hello, my fellow Canadian. So I think it's actually not just the pandemic that's affecting things, especially if you look locally. The effect of Brexit on the Irish market has been very impactful. So the interruption to supply chain, I think, is kind of a multi-prong attack on getting things where they need to go. Security facilitates a lot of these things. I like to call security the oil that greases the cogs in the machines. We make things move, hopefully. We are facilitating things. And what I would love to see is that reflected in the wages and the recruitment of security officers. I am not an ex-police officer. I'm not an ex-military person. I literally started 20 years ago as a security guard, boots on the ground, making $11 Canadian an hour. So I understand the challenge that brings, and I understand the challenge it brings both from the side of the security officer and from the side of the recruiter and from the side of trying to retain that talent and grow that talent when you have to convince your organization to invest more money. Nobody likes to invest more money. Or organizations typically want you to be cutting costs, not trying to make business cases to increase them. I think eventually we will hit some kind of a whiplash effect. Someday, hopefully soon, organizations will realize that you get what you pay for, and that's supply chain management, that's industrial security, that's every kind of security under the sun. You get what you pay for. And as people are discovering, now that, especially in Ireland, right now, everybody is recruiting. Every shop, every bar, every restaurant has a sign in the window saying recruitment. So what's going to be the draw to bring people into security when they can go work at Starbucks making $2 or €2 an hour more? And so a lot of this is going to be to the security managers to write those business plans. If you are doing supply chain security, if you are doing security management, brush up on your professional bid writing, business case writing skills, because you're the ones who need to convince your organization about the investment necessity for investing in improved wages for frontline security officers.
Jennifer, thank you very much indeed. Paul, can I come to you on this? And Paul, just to let you know, your equivalent in the UK, Michelle Russell, is actually coming to a thought leadership webinar we're doing on the day of the UK OSPAS in February. To address this issue is, what can we realistically expect regulators can do to help bring about change in the wake of the pandemic? Your thoughts on that, Paul?
Yeah, I think that's the challenge. And I suppose what we need to realise, I think what the industry needs to realise is we are a regulator. We are there to regulate, and that's our job. That's what we were put here for by government. We're not a representative body, or we're not a lobbying group for the industry. And I think the industry forgets that at times, and expects a lot more from us than what we can deliver. I think where we need to look at is probably where we can work hand in hand with the industry. And Jennifer alluded to there. I think one of the biggest problems in the industry here in Ireland, and particularly in the guarding sector, but it does go across the other sectors as well, is the whole thing around career paths for people, the whole things about recognition in terms of both pay and also in terms of conditions and rewards for staff. And we're very poor at that in this country, I think, and particularly in the security industry. I think, I think Garry mentioned about staff and retention of staff. I don't think that's borne out when you look at the statistics. We still see a churn rate of about 30% in the guarding sector staff when it comes to licensing. We see at the moment that, players in the industry are crying out to recruit staff at the moment. They cannot fill the vacancies they have. We hear, that there could be as many as 1,500 vacancies across the whole guarding sector at the moment. And that doesn't show, the industry in good light. And I think as a regulator, what we can do is work with the industry, identify the training and the qualifications that are needed, the career paths that are needed to retain people within the industry, and the rewards that should be given to those people. I think that's where regulators and the industry can work together and set goals for the industry as a whole.
Paul, thank you very much indeed. Let me come to you, Garry, on this, because Paul surely got a point here. And let me put this to you, Garry. Is it true that you as a supplier of security can only be as good as your client will allow you to? If the client won't pay, you can't be good. Ultimately, this is about clients not being prepared to pay in some cases and standards therefore slipping.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, it is. If the clients aren't paying, we can't obviously, we can't work at a loss, but we can kind of incentivize our staff in different ways. And the other thing as well is, do you want those people as clients? That's the big thing. Do you want clients who want to pay minimum but want the minimum amount but want to think? Like from our perspective, I found personally, I believe retail security is they're not paid enough, and because of the risk to the company. I mean, one false arrest is the bones of about 15,000 euros. That's borne on the company. So why would the company subject themselves to risk when you can go work? What? Absolutely.
But I mean,
I think, Garry, if sorry,
Paul,
I think it's important to recognise that there are companies out there who will take the risk and who will be willing to work with anybody once they get that few bob. And I think the industry has probably been its own worst enemy in this regard. We did have an employment regulation order in this country where there was a minimum wage set for the industry. Yet there were elements within the industry who fought against the new employment regulation order. And what we've seen in recent times is that wage costs are being cut again across the industry. So this
I don't agree, Paul. I mean, if you look at what Manguard Plus did, they enacted the ERO, regardless of it going to court. We're paying the €12 to everybody across the board, and we're bearing that cost.
But you're one of the few, I would say, Garry, who are actually doing that. If you look across the industry,
I know, but you can't say all of it's just one of the few. And look, I know there are other security companies that are paying the ERO that was supposed to come in, but they're not paying it to everybody. We made a decision, paid across the board. Ethically, it's the right thing to do, and it builds our brand, and it makes us a reputable company to work for.
But as I say, equally, you have companies on the other side who are unwilling to pay and are quite happy now to reduce wages in order to find those clients who are paying bottom rate.
Absolutely, and we found that when the JLC was found to be unconstitutional.
Garry, JLC for overseas people?
Joint Labour Court. It was a joint Labour Court payment. Look, when that was found to be unconstitutional, there were some companies in Ireland that went straight to the minimum wage. And look, we all know who they are. But do they have a good reputation? Not really. Will people work for them? Not really.
But Garry, about 2 weeks ago,
and they are the companies that are struggling to find staff now.
Well, Garry, here's a point. 2 weeks ago, we had a webinar, and we were talking about the role of security officers. And one of the panelists, CEO of a security supplier, a guarding security supplier, I asked him the direct question: why is it some companies would take low-value contract work? And the answer was, because we could still make a profit. And I guess, you know, that's the reality about this, that while you've got those clients who are prepared to engage in that sort of work, and you've got suppliers who will take it, and that is the case worldwide, they're in the security world is going to be judged by the lowest common denominator. I mean, is there a solution to that?
So if I can jump in for a sec, when I say I think you're going to get a whiplash effect, I think that we've started to really see that already in certain situations. If you guys think back to, I believe it was American Airlines a few years ago, where they dragged a physician off one of their planes. And it ended up, if you do the analysis of what that cost that American Airlines, it was about $1 billion in value. So when you talk about making business cases to get better trained officers, when you start talking about making business cases to have officers who are more professionalized, able to respond with a better sense of professionalism, with a better sense of tact, that's what the outcome gives you. You know what I mean? Officers who aren't going to cost their company $1 billion. All companies want to make money, right? No, most companies are not in business for charity reasons. And if you want to make money, you need to do that by showing your company in the best light. Part of the research that I did for my master's degree was actually looking at the impact that word of mouth can have on organizations. And it is phenomenal. Go on to Yelp, go on to Google Review. This is not a small phenomenon. If you drop the hammer and you do something horrible, your competitors will find out, the media will find out, members of the public will find out. God help us, go onto YouTube and just type in the word security guard and see what comes up. And that's the whiplash effect that people are going to eventually have to stop paying for.
Okay.
Totally agree with Jennifer. Absolutely, 100%.
But you see, well, okay, I understand that, but let's get sort of back to the core of this. Maybe what's coming through to me is this, not for the first time on this thought leadership webinars, is that there is something wrong with security management in client organizations when you have the problem of 30% turnover, when you have the problem of work being done at low value. It's all very well to say, as you, Jen and Garry have said, that hold on a minute, there's a real cost here. Right, it's obvious. So how in the world is it happening? And let me put it to you, the reason why it's happening is because corporate security managers are not up to the task. They're allowing it to.
Absolutely. And so if I can just jump back in, one of the things that has been my biggest pet peeve in the security industry for 20 some odd years is I have seen over and over again, and I'm not hating police officers. I love police officers. They're wonderful. They have an incredibly difficult job. But being a police officer for 10 years, 20 years does not prepare you to walk in the door into a security manager role. And yet time and time again, we see jobs come out that require previous policing experience or previous military experience. I know 1,001 police officers who have transitioned into being successful, exceptional security managers, but that is a transition period. There is nothing innately about being a police officer that prepares you to step into that role effectively. And yet organizations continue to look for that. And yet people who don't have that requirement get screened out. One of the biggest complaints I hear from my staff and from the frontline security officers is complaining about advancement opportunities because they are constantly getting screened out because they don't have police or military experience.
And I think to be honest, that has actually stopped. Well, it is stopping. I mean, if you look at a police officer, unless he's a chief inspector or a chief super or a superintendent or a military guy who's above the rank of colonel, he has no commercial awareness. He's never dealt with a budget in his life. Guards don't deal with budgets. They don't, and neither do army personnel. No disrespect to army guys, they have no commercial awareness. And when you're dealing in the commercial world, you need that awareness of budgets, ERO increases, PRSI contributions, training, uniforms. You need all that.
Garry, one of the arguments that was put forward on a previous webinar on this topic was that view is outdated, that men and women coming through the ranks in the police and military at the higher levels, do have to manage budgets, do have to take account of commercial realities, albeit in a public sector setting. And that with the background in security, they bring to the table a much needed skill, which is in danger of being lost by a rush to label them with the historical view that they didn't have the skill sets.
And how are they accountable then? There's no accountability within the police if they don't make a budget. There's accountability for me if I make a pricing error on a tender. It's a massive for our company. Yeah. There's no accountability. How accountable are they? They're not.
Yeah. But if you look across the industry, and particularly at that middle management level, most of the people, I would say, and certainly most of the people that I've come across, do not come from a security background, in terms of that they haven't worked up from the security guard all the way up the line. They've come in from another career. They've been brought in, whether it be the guards or secure, the defence forces or somewhere else. And that's a difficulty, I think, for the industry. And I said, it goes back to what I said. If you don't have a career path in your industry, a clear career path for people to follow, then it's a difficulty to attract people into your industry.
Garry,
but there is a clear career path within. There is a clear career path within the security industry. Look, if you look at it, your basic guard who starts in, if he comes in and does the certified protection officer course, certified supervisor and security manager, you can go on to do your ACES CPP, PCI and PSP. You can then go on and do a master's degree and then go on to do your doctorate. That's a clear progression.
It's a clear academic progression, Garry.
No, they're not. Sorry, the PSP, PCI and CPP are not academic qualifications. They're professional qualifications.
Paul?
What I'm saying, sorry.
Carry on, Paul, please.
No, what I'm saying, that is furthering yourself in terms of qualifications, education and so forth. But in terms of your actual career as a security guard, there are very few security guards moving up the lines into jobs of responsibility. That's Paul, what you will find when you look across the industry.
I did it. Jen did it. I started as a door supervisor.
But Garry, I'm actually going to take Paul's side on this. It is exceptionally difficult to do. I was really lucky in that I had really good mentors. And I think anyone who does take that career path has to be lucky enough to have really good career mentors who are going to help them identify those path routes. But we have probably 25 different security managers who work in our org, and we have 200 plus security officers. And the number one complaint that I hear is always about growth opportunities. They continually feel like they're getting kicked back, that there is not those potential for opportunities for growth. If you don't know the right people, you weren't in the guards with the right people, you didn't work in the Irish Defence Force with the right people, and they get ruled out. And I mean, you can say it's a small sample, but that's 250 people who are echoing that same sentiment. So I think we all have work to do in that area.
But I think if you want to progress within the security industry, and it's what I said in my opening statement, you have to take personal responsibility for your own professional or your own CPD. You have to do it.
I agree with that. You will always have to help yourself in that regard, Garry. But if you can't see a clear path, or if Jennifer say, if you don't have somebody to support you or mentor you through that path, it is very difficult for anybody to.
But I mean, if you look at Springboard now, you can do a QQI level 5 or 6 in security supervisory management for free. How many people are taking that up?
But Garry, we have security managers with CPP. We have security managers with PSI. We have security managers with those qualifications, and they're going out to market looking for advancement opportunities, and they feel like they're not getting them. I think industry-wide, of course, there's a way through. There is a path through. You can pick your way through the jungle, absolutely. But it is hard.
Jen,
listen, I agree with
Garry,
you. I've done it. I've picked my way through. And it's about, if you surround yourself with good people, good things happen. And it's about picking the mentors that are around you and people who are supportive. Move to a different company. If you're not being supported, move.
The thing is, though, Garry, it doesn't sound very attractive if you're an outsider listening to this, because it feels a bit like, yes, you can do it if you've got the right sort of support networks, but they can't be guaranteed. And the path may be problematic because there's a great big turnover, and those in the middle ground aren't security haven't got a security background. It doesn't in itself seem enticing, which brings me to my point. I wonder whether I could just come back to Jen. I want to come back to this point, Jen, that we spoke about earlier when we were talking about security managers not having the skill sets here. I mean, almost every word we're getting at leads to this point. Jen, what's the process by which we can begin to give a better impression of security to outsiders? In other words, whether this is recruits for guards or whether it's HR and facilities managers or CEOs in the C-suite, one of the issues here tends to be a perception issue. What's the route? I'm going to ask all of you this, if I might. What's the route by which we might begin to change that perception for the better?
Oh, there's a lot of controversy is going to come out of this one. I think, first of all, we need to start showing a more diverse workforce. First of all, foremost, I sit or watch these panels, and the amount of time that I see people with any diverse characteristics is really limited. And I mean, any level of diversity. I used to joke that when I moved to Scotland, I walked into a room full of older white male ex-cops. And those were the criteria for hiring every single chief security officer in Scotland. And that's true, I think, in Canada, that's true in Ireland, that's true in Scotland. It's a global truth, and we need to start changing some of that. People like that picture because it's a very professional looking picture. I agree, it is a very professional looking picture, but it's certainly not diverse. It certainly doesn't represent the workforce. When you see that workforce, you want your management to be reflective of your workforce. So let's start working on some of that. I remember going to a diversity work group that was a group of older white male ex-police officers sitting around trying to figure out how to recruit more diverse candidates. And no one thought to invite any of them to the table. So maybe that might be a step one. If we have regulations for security guards, maybe it's an idea to have regulations for security management, or have a credentialing in security. I know we have credentialing in security management, but maybe security managers have to get a license where you have to take a course on security management so you get exposed to ideas as budget management, people management, leadership, growth, all of those things that we complain constantly lack in our industry. And one of them might have to be public relations. One of my biggest pet peeves is anytime you see a security guard on the news, because 9 out of 10 times they look like a total doofus. Why are we not training our security guards, our frontline security guards, in public relations? There is on Netflix, not that I'm promoting Netflix, but there's a documentary called Rotten, I think it is, and they're doing a thing on Exxon. And part of the documentary goes to one of these big oil companies, and they're protesting. And I'm waiting to see this horrible security guard come outside and make a buffoon of himself. And I was blown away by the quality of that security guard who came out and was professional, polite, courteous, engaging. You want to change the security? That's what we need. We need to have professional, polite, courteous problem solvers demonstrating that to the rest of the world.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed. I want to ask Paul specifically about something there, because, Paul, it is an interesting point that, and I think this is true around the world, actually, Paul. There's a regulation of the lower levels. But it cropped up a few weeks ago that trainers aren't regulated, and yet they have a crucial influence. But more security management. I mean, a lot of the problem here seems to rest at the managerial level, and change can come about if that group is really on the ball. Paul, regulation and this.
And I agree. And I suppose our role as the regulator, I suppose, has been, we were given a very broad remit in terms of the sectors we had to regulate, and the pressure on us was to get those sectors regulated and to get it done as quick as possible. So we, as I say, we have 12 sectors regulated at the moment and a few more, and we focused on the contractors and we focused on those lower employees. Yes, we need to go further up the chain. We need to start looking at the supervisors, the managers and the directors and putting in regulation for those. It will happen. It's not going to happen soon, but it is on our agenda, and it's something that will happen, as I say, when we get through the workload that we have to do at the moment, that it will be the next phase to move up the channel. Just on the diversity issue, you know, that is a big problem for us. And even a simple one, male versus female, less than 9% of security staff are female, you know, and that is a big issue for the industry as well, I think, you know, just as a starting point on the diversity issue, without going into all those other issues that we need to address across the sector. And I think we need to promote people from all abilities across all sectors into the industry. And that is something we need to do. It is a customer facing industry by and large. And if you're not representing or reflecting what the customers that are coming towards you and the public that you're dealing with, you have an issue as well in the industry.
Paul, just to thank you. When you say that you are going, it's quite refreshing actually to hear you say that you will get to supervisors and managers. Yeah. Is there a barrier to that? Are you going to meet resistance here?
Totally, yeah. We had one. It's some years ago since I first mentioned it, that you know that was where we were heading, that we would be moving into supervisors and management. And I got a lot of feedback. I was sidestepped on a lot of occasions after that. People telling me we couldn't do it, we shouldn't do it, and all the reasons why we shouldn't and couldn't do it. But we get those arguments every time we go to regulate a sector or regulate a category. So that doesn't surprise me. People don't like change. They don't like to feel that they're accountable. And regulation does make people accountable. But it will happen. It will be coming down the line.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you. Gary, I'm interested to know what you think about this.
Yeah, look, I think it's very prevalent. I mean, if you're you do need to regulate it, right? But I think it should be the other way down. You know, the consultants first, and then down to managers and down to supervisors. Not the other way. I think the other way is just a churn. You're just churning, looking for money, really.
Well, it's an interesting point, Gary. So would you expect there to be objections to the regulation of management? Security management?
Oh, there will be. You'll have guys who
why? What's the problem? What's the barrier? What's the?
You will have the barrier. I believe will be, you know, whatever academic level you set won't be met. You'll have guys who are 40 years in the industry, no academic qualifications, but they want to be a security consultant.
But so what? So I mean, but Paul, would you?
Oh, sorry, but how do you demonstrate competence? It's education and experience.
Okay, but I mean, but why wouldn't everyone agree that's a good idea?
The people who don't have the academia will be the ones objecting to it.
Okay, I see that. Okay, I see that. Paul, is this an argument you would win, do you think, in the long run? You know,
well, I think that there's a very clear distinction between consultants and then managers and directors. I think that needs to be made clear from the start. And consultants will happen. We've already started down that road. It's taken a lot longer than we thought it might. But we've started down the road of licensing consultants, and that will happen in the next 12 to 18 months. We hope to have a public consultation on it early next year. So that is one thing that will happen. Look, we'll have the argument with the industry when the time comes. But just because people doesn't have the qualifications, you know, that shouldn't be an argument for not regulating that sector or that area. And we have other ways of sort of, if people don't have the qualifications, there are other ways of judging whether they're competent and qualified to get a license. And we've done that before and spoken about that before with the security industry. And the same can happen here.
Okay. Listen, we're running out of time, and I want to ask you each a question. I want to. I'm going to ask you to be very unfair on you. I'm going to ask you a massive question, and I'm going to give you 30 seconds each. I'll come to you first, Jennifer, if I might. If you had a magic wand and you could do one strategic issue to improve the security sector in Ireland, what would that magic wand would be the thing that you would most focus on? Jennifer first, please.
I think I'd tackle the wages. If we offered €15 an hour, €20 an hour, people would go to school to qualify, just the way they do for every other good trained job. People like the security industry. We work here because we love what we do. We want to do it, but we want to pay our rent at the end of the day, and we want our staff to be able to either. So my magic wand is on people's wallets.
Yeah, I mean, interesting point, isn't it? I mean, as you say, and it is a key thing, isn't it? Because people, when they're in school, talk about joining the police or military. They don't talk about joining the private security sector. And yet, you speak to people in the sector and they talk about the chance to service the public, an exciting job, varied career, opportunities to work in diverse environments. I mean, it's got a lot really, just not very well sold. Okay, sorry, that seems to me not a bad start. Paul, your thoughts, please.
Well, I would agree with Jennifer. I think that would be the first one. The pay side would be the first. But seeing as she's taken that one on me, I think, you know, again, going back to the whole thing about training and improving the training for people and expanding the training and setting out career paths for people so that they know if they get to a certain level in terms of training and experience and competence, that there is an opportunity there for them.
On that issue, just very, very quickly, Paul, a couple of weeks ago, Glenn Kittringham, who's listening today, was on the panelists, and he was saying, you've got to regulate the trainers. This is left into the mercy around the world of untrained people. Again, it sounds a reasonable point. Yeah.
We've done a lot of work in recent years around the trainers, and we haven't regulated them as such, but we have tried to, I won't say control, that's probably not quite the best word, but we've tried to get them to work in tandem with us to improve training and to improve the quality of the courses and the quality of the trainers themselves. I don't know if regulating trainers is the way to go. There's a lot of diverse interests in the training area as well, tackle. So wherever difficulty we might have with the industry itself and improving things within the industry, I think trying to regulate trainers could be a nightmare. There's so many different players in there and other state agencies as well also involved in that area. There might be a bit of a tour for if we were to go down there.
Interesting. Garry, with your magic wand, what are you going to wish for?
I think I would echo exactly what Jen said. If we had an ERO for 15 or 16 euros an hour,
ERO,
Europe Employment Regulation Order.
Okay.
So it's like a minimum wage for security officers. I think it would definitely encourage people to enter the industry, and it would encourage people to move at a higher rate. If security officers were paid 16 euros an hour, what would managers be paid? You know, and security would become a profession rather than just a job.
And the thing is, though, Garry, just one follow-up point to that. What is the key way in which wages could be increased? What's the strategic thing we need to do that?
It's to increase the ERO, the Employment Regulation Order, to 16 euros an hour.
Yeah, okay.
So if it's legally done, it means then nobody can pay less than that.
Yeah, okay. So, and he would take that, yeah?
I just want to add on to what Garry was saying.
Very quickly, Jen, right at time.
In Canada, nurses did not used to have a bachelor entry, and they were paid, let's say, 30 bucks an hour. Nurses, as an industry, got together and say, we are now bachelorette entry only. You must have a bachelor degree to become a registered nurse in Ontario, and their salaries all went up as a matter of fact. So maybe we as an industry collectively need to decide what our minimum standards are, and that it's more than just a 1-week course.
Panel, thank you so much for your question, for your debate. Very, very, very interesting. We could go on, and I'd very much like to, but we've run out of time. But thank you for that. Thank you for the questions. I'm sorry, I got 3 questions in advance. I did incorporate them, but I didn't name the questions. So sorry about that. But thank you very much indeed. And hopefully we covered the issues. We'll return to this in due course. Just a final few comments from me, if I might. Just remind people that we mentioned the Ireland OSPAS. They close on the 6th of December. India, by the way, closes on the 10th of December. So they're both before Christmas. Bit more time in New Zealand, but don't take it. We've also got to say that these are the categories for the Irish OSPAS. Please, please, please do encourage those out there who are outstanding at what they do to enter the Irish OSPAS. It matters. It matters that we recognise those who are particularly good at what we do. And notice what, Jennifer, you should be noticing about outstanding equality, diversity and inclusion initiative. So let's hope that features. Just finally to say, if you'd like to attend some of the award ceremonies, we've got the Tackle Economic Crime Award ceremony on the 6th of December. It's virtual, it's free. We've got the Cyber OSPAS, first ever Cyber OSPAS Global Award Ceremony, virtual on the 14th of December. And you can register for both of those free of charge. Finally to say, we'll be going through it all again next Thursday, when the topic will be the big issues impacting on security. What now? What next? And the following week at the same time, security and journalism Is the industry getting the reporting that it deserves? So new panels, new discussion, new topics, same debate and controversy that I hope that you enjoy. Thank you very much indeed once again to the panel. Thank you very much indeed to the audience. And in the background, I've got to thank Christine Brooks and Sarah Gray for helping me. Ladies and gentlemen, hopefully we'll meet you next Thursday, if not before, but wherever you are in the world, until we meet again, stay safe.